Rutgers football is having one of its best seasons in a long time. Not only have they chopped wood, they've stacked some wins, and they're already bowl eligible. So in comes the top-ranked Ohio State Buckeyes on Saturday. So let's talk about the Scarlet Knights' chances of maybe an upset with Richie Schnyderite, who covers Rutgers for Rutgers Rivals, or Rivals Rutgers. Say that 50 times. I don't know on that one, but we've had you on so much, I should get that right on the first one. Thanks for joining us, man. Let's talk about Ohio State's offense versus Rutgers defense. Greg Schiano and the rest of the world has said that Marvin Harrison Jr. is arguably one of the best players in the country. Robert Longerbeam is one of the top corners in the Big Ten. Has the Scarlet Knights defense shown you that enough that they can go toe-to-toe with Maserati Marv and this Buckeyes passing attack?
Yeah, I know Schiano said arguably, but there's no argument here.
Yeah.
He might be the best receiver in the country.
Top two, and he's not two.
Exactly. He's something else. This Rutgers secondary has been really good this year, though, so far. Between Robert Longerbeam, Flip Dixon, a transfer, came in. Shaquan Loyal's also at safety. And then Max Melton, preseason, was ranked a top 5 cornerback in next year's NFL draft. So they have a legitimate shot of stopping him, but I think it's actually going to come down to the Rutgers defensive line. And if they can kind of cause a little bit of havoc for Kyle McCord, who's had some fumble issues this year for Ohio State. And he's not the typical Ohio State quarterback that you're used to seeing, and not the typical Ohio State offense you're used to seeing. They've kind of had their struggles throughout the season.
So you think it's the Rutgers defensive line that can create the turnovers? I'm thinking we're talking about a pass defense that only gives up 156 yards total passing per game, which is second in the country behind Michigan, and they do it without sign stealing. So hats off to that Rutgers defense. Let's Riverside and talk about the Buckeyes defense, because as we all know, it's just a front seven of future NFL talent. They give up the 4th fewest yards total in the country. So how does Rutgers offense match up and put some points on the board against the stingy Buckeyes defense?
Yeah, I think you're going to try to establish the run early and often. It's going to be tough because that Buckeyes defensive line, again, similar to Marvin Harrison, might also have the best defensive line group in the country. They are stacked from head to toe, and like you just mentioned, their front seven as well. It's going to be extremely tough, but Rutgers' bread and butter is that run game. And if they can get that going with Kyle Monangai, who's the Big Ten's leading rusher, or Gavin Wimsett, whose last game 2 weeks ago ran for over 140 yards or something like that, I think they'd have a chance. But it's going to be a tight one. It's going to be a lot tighter than people think, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I was going to ask, that kind of leads into the next question, because I don't really need predictions here. We just want to hear your thoughts and expectations on this game. Can Rutgers pull off an upset, or can they at least, I guess, keep it close?
I'll say probably not an upset, so you're probably not going to see the field goal posts go in the Raritan River over there. But I do think that they're going to keep it pretty close. I think they'll keep it close for the first 2, maybe even 3 quarters, and then I think eventually you'll just see the talent gap between the two teams. Rutgers is still a building program. They are 6-2 on the year and bowl eligible for the first time since 2014. But they are still building, and there still is a significant talent gap. Rutgers recruiting classes over the past couple years were in the 30s, 40s, and even 50s. Ohio State has a consistent top 5 recruiting class. So Rutgers might get there one day, and they probably will get there, and they're on the rise, and you could see it. But Ohio State's talent right now is just too much to match.
Well, if they can keep it close, let's say they keep it close, lose by maybe a field goal, maybe even 1-possession game, that shows that they've kind of closed the gap in getting there to be able to match up with Ohio State. How big is that in terms of recruiting, and especially keeping some of these Jersey kids in state?
Yeah, it's huge. And you see a couple of those Jersey guys on the other side, and Davison Igbinosin at cornerback starting for them, Cody Simon at linebacker, Tywone Malone's a rotating defensive lineman for them. And that's just a couple of the Jersey guys they have. And if you could just play really close and play tight against this Ohio State team who's #1 in the country, that's your selling point right there to recruits, and saying, hey, you could be the difference maker, or you could be the difference maker, or if all of you stay home, that's the difference maker.
Yeah, protect the Garden State. Richie, thanks for joining us, my man.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me.